Hello and welcome to the Hedonistic Way at Midday show. I'm Renee Main, and as always, I am about to introduce you to an absolutely epic human being who really changed things up for me in terms of what she does and how she's doing it, and this amazing the importance of her work is what I want to say. And you may or may not have read the brief, but the woman who I will be sharing with you today absolutely turned anger on its head for me. I think anger is probably one of the most misunderstood emotions that we experience. And I honestly believe that once we dismantle and once we begin to really understand anger, it really changes how we show up and how we feel every day. But more importantly, what we can do when we are angry and how we can process that in a really honoring, integrated way. So I am going to see if the beautiful Stacia is on the line. I can't see who's watching yet. Okay, Stacia, if you are watching, can you just comment on the live, and I should be able to invite you in from there. So for anyone else who's watching, I would like to, beautiful, I can see that you're watching, beautiful girl. There we go. And I'm going to add you in, and I'm everybody. I introduce to you the amazing woman doing amazing, incredible, important work, and that is Stacia. Hello, beautiful woman. Woohoo! Every time I do this, I still go, please work, and then it's a big yes when it actually happens.
Yeah, great. Okay,
Beautiful. Now, I want to just acknowledge, I was introducing you just now, and something that I didn't actually say was I went to your workshop at the Seven Sisters Festival, and it was on the last day, and what it did for me was absolute, not just me, and I don't know how many people were at that workshop, but there was a lot of women at that workshop, and I think it's pretty safe to say that you moved every single person in that space. It's incredible work that you're doing, and really frigging important work that you're doing. I want to ask you, how did you begin understanding anger the way that you do? How did that happen? Because it seems like it's incredibly niche, but I've never ever seen anything like it, and I've been around a really long time. So yeah, tell me how you fell into this work.
I feel like there could be so many different answers to that question in relation to the culture I was brought up in and all of these sorts of things. However, my first, the memory that comes to me right now when I tune into it is being in a somatic psychotherapy group with my partner Gero, who I created this body of work with. And we were with a friend of ours who's a Radix somatic psychotherapy practitioner, and we'd been invited in, and we decided to go as a couple and go and do something as participants for a change. And he introduced us to a practice called the tail pound, which is, you saw a demonstration of it, I think, on the Seven Sisters weekend. And it's an anger practice, and we worked a lot with anger and fear in these groups that we met with each week and stepped into somatic experiencing practices. And I found myself shaking in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
Maybe this was 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, or something like that. It's sort of one of the first memories that stands out of doing direct work with anger and recognizing that I had a pretty strong visceral reaction to people expressing anger in a really safely held environment, let alone externally out there.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks later, we were back in that space again, and I noticed that I was able to step into that practice after moving a bunch of fear that had come up, that was in my system around the shaking in the corner part. Yeah. It sort of blows me away that I'm offering reclaiming anger workshops now, and I look back at that experience and didn't really realize that I had a relationship with anger that created this fear tremoring response. And I've seen it in so many people since doing this work. And I was in this group with Gero for a year, and I had some private coaching sessions in that over that time as well. And my relationship with anger shifted to one where I felt like I was able to start enjoying the experience of having this energy charge me up rather than shut me down, and recognize that there was a relationship between anger and fear. But it was probably not until, I'm just going to adjust the hair in my face, wasn't until the discovering this body of work called possibility management, which works with 4 core feelings, and it influences quite a bit of who I am now and what we offer in the art of relating, and particularly reclaiming anger, but so does the somatic psychotherapy work, and so does some of the shamanic practices that I was involved with before all of this.
Yeah.
It's just been this interesting journey that's unfolded over time. And I think the radix work that I just spoke of was part of opening my eyes to my relationship with anger, and then stepping into the possibility management. And I think it was at Confest about 5 years ago that myself and Gero, my partner, and his sister, who was visiting from Germany, decided to offer an anger something at Confest for 2 hours, and had planned a small one-day workshop in Melbourne, because we, from different places, had all recognized that there was something in this energy that shuts so many of us down that has the potential to open so many of us up, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm really curious because you are, and this is the first time we've actually connected, but I get the impression that you are an incredibly grounded, enlightened, awakened woman, right? And I think in my personal experience is traditionally, and what we've seen in New Age spirituality over the past few years, as anger's got a really bad rap, and we've shunned it a little bit. And as you said so beautifully, is we shut it down and pretend that it doesn't exist. Now, I'm really curious as to your discovery when you talk about your somatic therapy and training, and I want to say the fusion or the discovery that you had that anger has within that, or let me probably word it a better way, because that wasn't a really direct question, is what is the role of anger in spirituality?
Interesting question. So the word presence is what comes to mind first and foremost for me. And I guess that, the question's a little dependent on everyone's different definitions of what spirituality is.
Yes.
So for me, what I've discovered these days, without a healthy relationship with anger, let's put it the other way around. Having a healthy relationship with anger means that I have a healthy relationship with the energy that I can draw on to fill my energetic field to a certain extent. I mean, I'm filled with all of the feelings, with fear, anger, joy, and sadness, but I can draw on anger to wholly, which means a message just popped up on my phone for some reason, and now the screen's disappeared. Sorry, there we go. And I can use anger to bring myself back into presence when I get distracted from things like that. Bringing myself into my center, using that energy that can be often outwardly expressed, thrown outwardly, or thrown at us from somewhere else. We can turn that around and actually recognize that this is an energy that is available. It's part of our life force energy that I can use to make change. It's something that I need in order to recognize that something isn't okay, and I want something to be different, to have a no, to have a yes, to set clear boundaries externally, but also to, and more so in relation to spirituality, and what you asked was being able to set really clear internal boundaries.
Yes.
To hold a clear container for myself, to ensure that my presence is here with me, and I can make this choice by recognizing, oh, I'm distracted, and I'm going to use the energy of anger to make a change and make something different happen. It's also about going for what I want, and there's this fine line between anger and aggression. And this relationship that so much of the broader population sees anger as destructive and violent.
Yes.
And yet, to me, that's what happens when we push this energy down, because we've seen it out there as destructive and violent. We create a story that it's not healthy, and then we push it down. And, you know, as a kid, I remember saying no, that I didn't want to do something, or something didn't feel okay, and being told that that's not okay, and pushing that down, and then learning not to trust my own instincts and the information that's available in that energy. So being able to then sort of reclaim this energy is being able to reclaim my capacity to speak clearly for what I want. And that's to myself. You know, I want to sit still and listen to myself right now, no to all of the distractions. Yeah, I'll pause there for now, but just
So, and anger, you know, as is how we perceive anger currently is it is destructive, and it's I can hear myself back as feedback. So can you hear me okay? The sound's breaking up for me, but if you can hear me okay, that's fine. Once we really start to, I want to say, befriend and acknowledge and work with our anger in this beautiful way, you know, empowering way, because what you teach, I think, is that it's using it as, not pretending that it doesn't exist, because it does exist, but how can we befriend it and use it in a way that feels good? So once people learn how to do this, how does anger actually feel for you now?
For me, anger is about aliveness and clarity. And there's an element of it's connected to courage as well. But it feels, I can feel a joy, like when I think about anger now, I feel more joy than fear. And look, there are still times when there's a ferocity that comes of my own anger where I can still feel an edge of fear, but I've also learned that fear is my intuitive guidance. And so there have been times where I've felt deep sadness, and I've been irritated because I haven't been allowing the sadness to come, and that irritation is a kind of anger. So I've done an anger practice, which is, you know, laying on a mattress and like just letting that energy move. And what I've discovered in that is that the sadness, it created a clarity in my system, because there was irritation and sadness and a bit of fear, and it was mixed. So anger brings clarity into my internal space. It also brings clarity into external spaces. But this deep sadness that was there, this particular time that I'm remembering, was a clarity that the anger brought to the sadness, if that made sense. I was sort of stuck in a swampy place of like victimy, oh, I don't know what's going on and I feel sad, and I could feel an irritation, but then recognizing, okay, there's an irritation there because there's not clarity. What if I draw on anger and allow that to sort of flush my system?
Yes.
And bring clarity into a space. It also shows up in a lot of really small ways, where I'll be in a conversation with friends or with a partner, and I can sense that there's something going on under the surface, and I can feel it. I can feel it sort of runs for me. Anger runs down the center line. It's upright. It strengthens my bones. And it tells me when something's not on track, when clarity needs to be brought into a space, when I'm not okay with something, but also when the space is not okay with something. And, you know, we can see it out there in the culture. There's a lot of anger around, we're not okay with how the people are ruling our country. We're not okay with what's happening about climate change or whatever that might be. Yeah.
How can we begin to understand anger? So for a lot of the people that are watching and will continue to watch this, is they see the world where people are doing these hideous things, hurtful things, and relating them back to anger and suppressed anger or religion or whatever it is. How can we begin to understand and dismantle our own anger? What do you think that it is that people really need to know and firstly understand about anger?
Firstly, anger being one of the core feelings that we feel, and that we're born feeling.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that there's a reason why these feelings exist, and that there is a distinction between something that we've now called anger as opposed to something that we've called sadness or fear or joy. Yeah. They're there for a reason. I also, as you said already, you know, that we see so much out there that we have created we've brought an association to of anger as destructive and creates, you know, it's part of domestic violence, it's part of war, it's part of family and relational breakdown. Yeah. And yet nowhere are we taught about our feelings and our emotions, that I'm aware of at least, in a really clear, distinct way in our education system. And so we're learnt to cope with rather than utilize this energy and these tools. And we're learning from parents and culture that doesn't really know what to do with it and pushes it to the side in order to get on with life. And this is part of life. So we're denying ourselves a part of, you know, a vital part of our lives. And what I continue to say at the beginning of our workshops is, or to share about, is this really clear distinction, which has come from the work of possibility management to some extent, but I've also been, you know, Gero and I were having conversations around what is this difference between these words feeling and emotion, because they get used interchangeably in so many different contexts. In the same sentence, you'll find people using those same words, and they have different meanings. And what I see out there, I believe, is what I call emotion, or what we call emotion, which is this, you know, years and years of suppressed feeling. And that actually anger in and of itself is pure neutral energy and information that comes in response to something that's happening right now in this present moment. And an example that I use, because it's really simple to grasp, is that someone's walking towards me quickly and I don't want them to come any closer. And so anger may, you know, I may feel the heat rise in my body because I'm noticing something needs to change. And I have the choice to listen to the signal of anger and say no or stop. and let that rise and let that information come and let that voice speak that message and let that feeling be heard and completed. Or I can be the nice girl, which I think is, or the nice guy, whatever it is, which is a really, damaging, it's damaging behavior, I think, that I see all the time out there. And notice that I really don't want that person to come any closer. I could say stop right now, but that might hurt their feelings. So here we're talking about feelings, and yet I'm hurting my own feelings by not listening to them and speaking them. I'm pushing it down and going, yeah, yes, I'll hug you, but God, I don't really want to. And saying yes when I mean no. I'm getting goosebumps in saying that because I've done that way too many times in way too many situations.
We all have.
Yeah, and so when we, if we start doing that at the age of 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever that is, or not kissing Uncle Bob or Auntie whatever goodbye as a kid because you don't want to, because it doesn't, your fear, your intuitive guidance is telling you something just doesn't feel right. My body knows best, and I'm saying no, but Mummy and Daddy are saying that's rude, so I should do that. And again, I'm pushing down the feeling and the action of saying no. And each time we push this down, it stays there. It's an incomplete. It's spoken. It hasn't been heard. I haven't listened to it and spoken my truth. And I've started to tell myself a story that, in fact, what my body is telling me in its intuitive knowing isn't something I should trust. And so I give my own center of authority away to my parents at quite a young age, and my capacity to know what my own true knowing is disappears. And I'm speaking about my own experience, and it's not just my experience. It's it's nearly everyone I speak to's experience, that we're told not to be rude and speak our no and set our boundaries. And when we push and push and push this down, and
we've lost you, gorgeous. I will get Stacia back. Here we go. I'm gonna add you back in now. As Stacia is coming back in, I really want to acknowledge then how we can begin right now to dismantle anger and how it's showing up for us. And that is to purely recognize within yourself, does your body temperature start to rise? Does your breath begin to fasten its pace? Is that anger? And instead of just shutting it down, is giving it some airtime. And that's, I was just recapping, I'm not sure if you just heard that, gorgeous, something that you just said that I think is really prominent in what people can do is really begin to recognize their own signs of what their own anger looks like. And instead of ignoring it and putting on the, yes, I better do this phase, and that mask, and to be respectful and to be good. And it's something that I do and have, in the past, and massively so. My good girl runs high. It's something that, it's been a huge thing for me. But so I love what you just said there, is to really opening up that conversation. And is it the fastness of breath? Is it your body temperature rising? Like really beginning to understand what it is for us. And instead of, suppressing it, just having a conversation with it. So
and it's important to start to recognize the difference between, is this a feeling? Is this the feeling of anger that's here right now, that's in direct response to what's happening in this very moment? Or is there a massive big, because a little bit of heat can rise in the, with 10 or 20% of anger that you need to say no to that one person that's coming a bit too close in that example I used. But in the same example, if you've had people cross your boundaries in very dangerous ways for a long, long time, it might be that you've either shut it down completely and you go into collapse and fear, but it also might be that all of the anger that is that's been suppressed in there for a long time doesn't just come up as a little heat, you know, a little bit of heat and a signal to say no. It might come up in an enraged outburst, which is way out of proportion to what's happening right now. And it could be like a get that fuck away from me, you know, this real like rah! Or the partner that asks you a question that taps you into the absolute rage because you've been asked that question way too many times, and it's tapped into the stockpile of emotional rage that's been there for a long time. And I've had, no, I know this experience for myself, absolutely, and it certainly comes up with the people that we love more than absolute strangers, because it's often with the people that we love that we choose to push down the feelings because we want to be loved and we don't want to hurt them and we don't want to be rejected, and we want mummy or daddy to, you know, love us and feel safe and belong. And so we push our feelings down, and yet in doing so we're creating such an internal charge that, you know, later in life it just explodes out onto other people. And what's really helped me is to recognize, is this a feeling that I can speak? This doesn't feel okay right now. Would you mind just standing over there? Or I just want to change positions in my chair because I'm uncomfortable. I mean, often that's a way we can use anger as well. Something's not okay and I want something to change. And yet there's someone sitting next to me, so I don't want to move in case I interrupt them, or just so many of those little things, you know. And these are just all little signals that we experience in our body. Like fear gives us signals that something needs to change. Anger helps us to take action. Sadness keeps us into connection with ourselves. But it is like it's a lifelong work that we've created for ourselves, you know, of actually having shoved down so much. And then, you know, it doesn't need to take as long, but it's certainly, there's not a quick fix, but being able to bring a bit of a gap in between. Is this a feeling that's in response to what's happening right now? Or is this an emotional charge that is reacting, like that what's happening now has opened the doorway and all of this stuff I've shoved down that still hasn't been heard just wants to come charging through. Yeah.
And what if, when that does happen, so what if, you know, because I'm sure that would happen in the beginning when you're really reclaiming your anger, you know, I can imagine that would come up a lot, that it is the residue of your past experiences of every single time when you haven't spoken your truth and what you wanted, and used, you know, your yes when you really wanted to say no, and all of these things to be nice. What can people do in that moment where it's come out in whatever way, but then they've gone, oh crap, this is not actually what I'm feeling right now. This is my past making its way forward. What can people do in that moment?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So like a big part of what we do in the reclaiming anger work is create safe spaces for people to move this big charge, and to recognize we've you know, most of us, if not all of us, have got so much stored anger and other stuff. So you know, I spoke about a towel pound before, and it's sort of it's tricky to show you some of these things on video, but but I can speak about a couple of things. So it's basically the main thing I'm going to say is don't bring your emotional charge into contact with the person that you've realized it's not about, because it's going to just create disconnection, and emotion doesn't create connection. Feeling creates connection. And so, you know, one thing that you can do is to speak that. If it is that, you know, it might be that you're on your own and you can speak it to yourself, but if you're with someone or in a group, you could just have a moment of, I need to pause because I realized that there's actually a big emotional charge here that's not about what's happening right now. And I just need a moment to sort of separate that from this moment, which you can do with practice, with intention. Just, okay, I'm just going to recognize that's there. I'm going to put that on the shelf because I don't have space to deal with that right now. I'm in a business meeting or whatever that is, and it's just not going to work. I'd love to see workplaces with emotional release soundproof rooms for this very purpose. that's another step. And so you can then, but you can put it on the shelf, but then you also need to take the responsibility for that. And we talk to people at the end of our trainings and say, keep up a practice, 3 by 3 by 3, 3 minutes a day, 3 days a week for 3 months.
Yeah.
Just allocate 3 minutes to folding a towel in half, rolling it up, putting an elastic band on each end, and whacking it on the ground. And there's a particular way that you can do that helps to charge the body that I won't go into right now. But there are other bodies of work that invite people to bash cushions, or to another practice that we use is doing mat work, which sort of looks like a tantrum. But one of the most important things, though, is to not go into a destructive space. Because it's, this part that feels really big also feels really painful, and it doesn't really like being responsible for all of that pain, and it doesn't want to feel it. And which is why we throw it out onto other people.
Yes.
Because it's too hard to feel ourselves. So, taking responsibility for this, when I say taking responsibility for emotion, I mean in every sense of the word, not just I'm going to go away and punch a hole in the wall instead of in your face, which is often, could be what happens. It's about doing it in a really safe way with a commitment to not hurt yourself or anybody else. Yeah. I had an experience some years ago now where Gero and I were sitting in our office talking about what content we were going to write on our website. And it was quite an open, amicable conversation. And within about a minute, I noticed myself sitting here with the eyes sort of starting to noticing there's some anger there, and my fist was getting a bit more like this. And Gero said, "What's going on? There's something's not right." And I was like, "I just feel really angry." And I could feel an irritation with him because he wasn't coming up with the answers around how we were going to write this content, and I didn't quite know what I wanted it to be. But what I was noticing really quickly was that I was feeling extremely enraged, which was way out of proportion to the space that we were in and the conversation we were having. But I was able to recognize that was there, and said to him, "I'm just going to go out of the room and I'll be back in a couple of minutes." I took myself to the bedroom. I started screaming, doing a tantrum on the bed in a safe way that I know how. And just allowed myself to say the words that were there, which what wanted to come out to him in that room was, "You don't know what the fuck you're doing." And I was just screaming these words out. But what I'd also noticed, and then the words were gone, and that wasn't part of the story anymore, but there was just a lot of energy there. And what it turned into within about a minute was I didn't really know what I was doing, and I really wanted him to, and I felt angry because I wanted him to save me or him to rescue me. And I think part of that was about my father. I think part of that was just about not knowing what I was doing as a kid and wanting my dad to rescue me, and him not being there in the way that I wanted him to be at times, which is not his responsibility either. And I came back into the room with Gero within about a minute or so, and sort of sat down and went, "Hi, I don't know what I'm doing." And that was it. And then I could laugh and go on, but that could have turned into a completely different scenario of me blaming him for not knowing what he was doing, and it escalating, because this is often what happens when we let the emotional charge come in, that there's an escalation that happens.
Yeah, that's right. And there's such power in that, is because I'm beginning to realize is our anger and frustration in that moment, as you say, is the percentage and likelihood that it's solely about what's happening in front of you is a minuscule percentage, so more than likely we just go around projecting our anger and frustration, and as you say, it feels horrible in your body. So anger comes out really quick, and it's fiery, and it's just because it's like, oh, just get it out of me, and I want it out, and I just don't care where it's going, and blah. But that is so destructive, and that's something that I'm really beginning to understand more and more. And I think be compassionate about our own experiences as well, and our own mummy issues, daddy issues, childhood issues, ex-boyfriend issues, whatever the story is to just holding yourself in that space to go, I love you enough to just understand that I'm just going to shelve you just for a second because I'm not going to project it on this person in front of me. And I'm doing that with my girls as well. And that's thanks to you, because I want everybody watching is that there are safe, like the importance of the safe spaces that we need to create for ourselves to release this anger. And you know, and I was doing the towel with my daughter because, you know, she's a teen, and and I'm going, it's okay to be angry, like it's really okay. But if you're not angry at me, but you're speaking to me really rudely, like that doesn't make me feel good, and that doesn't help either of us. So for her to just, and for me as well, is that, you know, to separate yourself. Actually, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at my day or whatever it is. Okay, let's get that out of your body. There's so many things that I want to ask you. I just want to clarify, because you've been talking a lot about feelings and emotion, and you're so right, is we do talk about them like they're the same thing. So for everybody watching, so the feeling is the present state.
Yep.
And the emotion is the well that it comes from. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say the well that it comes from, but they're connected. So
right.
Feeling is the present. Feeling is what comes in response to the present moment.
Yeah.
Because we have energy, you know, we have energy just sort of moving, you know, energy is moving us. And in a way, to me, that is our feeling state that is constantly keeping us in motion. When we don't listen to feelings, so let's just call emotion incomplete feelings. There are a couple of different kinds of emotions, and we go into that in a different way.
Yes.
We go into that in more detail over the weekend. There's incomplete feelings. So when we don't say no,
yes,
or when we don't go for that thing and take the action on the thing we really want as well, because that's also suppressing.
Yeah.
Then we're pushing down the feeling that wants to be heard and spoken and taken action on, because once something is heard, it's complete. It's the same if there's communication, you know, with communication of any kind, really. Once something is heard, it's complete, and it'll keep knocking and pushing and bashing and shoving until it's heard. And if we don't hear the feeling, it gets pushed down. We don't take action. And so the emotional stockpile is incomplete.
Yeah. What can we do then if it's something in our past, and because I'm asking for myself even, is because, and if you didn't speak your truth in that moment, so it's absolutely incomplete. So can we release that in a healthy way without necessarily tracking this person down or whatever it is for everybody else? How can we complete that, without backtracking and speaking? Do we have to speak to that person directly? Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, it does make sense. And it's pretty much the same answer as there, you know, what happens when we notice there's this big emotional charge there that's not about the person. And I talked about, you know, going, you know, taking responsibility for it, putting it on the shelf. It's about, like we've got, you know, I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for many, when, you know, I have had thousands of times where I didn't express a feeling that was true in the moment, and it became incomplete. And I can't possibly even know what they all are, let alone find all those people to tell them that. But it's really about the energy that's in the body, so that, you know, the bigger the stockpile of emotional energy I've got in there, the heavier the weight is that I'm carrying around. And so creating spaces where that can safely move, is key, because if I'm full up with a whole bunch of old stuff that I've just shoved down, my physical body starts to suffer. So physical illness starts to become a problem, and mental health can also become a big problem.
Absolutely.
And so if I recognize that's part of my experience as a human being, and I can take responsibility for that and have regular spaces where I can, for example, bash the cushions or use the towel or have a tantrum on my bed with the voice. Like, this is really key. And this is why, I mean, it's, I'm speaking a lot of this stuff now, and it's not as easy to go away and do it on your own, because we trick ourselves in so many ways. And working with other people, and particularly in group spaces, I've had so many people show me my blind spots around how I'm sabotaging myself and keeping this stuff in, because it also keeps me small, and it means that might keep me safer. And it's taken me quite a while to do the work that I've done to be able to get to the point where I can hold big spaces for people to, with Gero, of course, but to be able to move this energy through. So in my experience, it's about being able to take responsibility by moving the physical body, but also the vocal part of it. A lot of people talk about getting angry or frustrated and going for a jog, and I think that's not a bad thing to do. Go for a run, go to the gym, pump some iron, like do that, those kinds of things, move the physical body.
Yeah.
But one of the key beautiful gifts of anger is being able to speak your truth clearly and say no or say yes. And each time you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to all of those things. And each time you're saying yes, like no to something, you're saying yes to other things. So there is something about the voice that is really key in anger. Because the physical, the energetic bodies, they're saying something through body language, but it's the voice that speaks the clarity of the message of anger. Yeah. And until the voice is part of that expression and part of that release, something is still being held in. So you can run till the cows come home, and you can punch punching bags, and all of those things are great physical releases. Yeah. But until the voice comes through, it's not complete. Yeah. And this is a big part of what we encourage people to do in sessions and in the trainings as well, is to let the voice come. And often what comes is a memory or some words that might not sound very politically correct or nice. Whatever that is, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to remember all the moments. Just whatever needs to come comes. And there might be some bigger traumatic experiences. Perhaps there's a lot of trauma that comes into the spaces that we work in, where the words that weren't spoken get spoken. And often they're words that weren't spoken in a number of occasions over a number of years. And this healing can happen quite quickly. We often say that emotion is for healing, it's not for navigating, and feeling is for navigating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
which is just when you say that, absolutely huge, because just there in that becomes the importance of really starting to differentiate the difference between feeling and emotion. Yes. And that's something that, I've said numerous times in the past, is our emotions are our navigation system, but you're so right. It's actually your feelings that are the navigation system. So that is such an important distinction.
It really is. I mean, every time I do a training, it's like, if all that you walk away with is this distinction of what that a feeling is for navigating and emotion is for healing. Like, emotion's old. It's not about making decisions about what's happening right now, and yet it feels so big, this emotional energy.
Yeah.
And it makes us feel powerful. I've certainly felt that myself. When this big charge comes and I feel all righteous and powerful, and I want to make this big life decision because it feels so big and important, and it's not about what's happening right now. It's really old stuff, and it's just about being moved through where the feelings, you know, the anger, sadness, fear, and joy, I often map them out on a circle like a compass, and they're just as equally valuable as north, east, west, and south are to navigate.
Absolutely.
They
Exactly.
work
And that,
together.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
something that is huge, that, you know, is a part of the hedonistic way, is to just smash the hierarchy of emotions or feelings that we have. Because I think that that has just led us down a path that is really destructive and disempowering. I want to ask you something. Is the power of your work is absolutely insane, and I want to ask you, what do you do? Because the shadow side of anger is so, I guess, prominent, and that feels equally huge. How do you, or what do you do to, what do I want to say, balance out? I mean, because I'm sure that you would have the dance between entering into the shadow of anger and the light of anger. How do you navigate through that space?
So what I think you're asking is, what do I do when this emotional charge comes, and that the part that wants to destroy, that is that sort of like the shadow side? Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring
And just even like using like anger and going into ego, you know,
Yeah.
and that, you know, that powerful surge, you know, or using anger, and if that's, you know, if it's sabotage or victim or whatever that's showing up, how do you navigate through that space?
Mm. Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a lot of, you know, there's some questions I've been asking myself lately of, you know, how do I use my anger to be assertive, which is what it's really one of the things it's useful for, to use my voice to speak up, to say yes to what I feel passionate about, because that's also part of anger. And how do I keep track of my, where I might be feeding my ego? And yeah, and it's it's interesting that you ask this. I mean, I guess having done anger work for quite a while now, I feel like the big emotional charges that I have that can sort of forge their way into those spaces have become less. And yet I'm noticing a lot more subtle ways that I can push my opinion into spaces, because anger is also about penetration. And it's really important. I think it's really important that we have a relationship with anger, so that we can feel confident and in ourselves, and in, you know, being in certain, or being in any spaces that we choose to take ourselves in. And yet, how do we stay connected with ourselves and with the environment, and not get too egotistical? And for me, it's also about having a relationship with sadness and fear and joy, but more so sadness and fear.
And she's dropped out. It always happens at the most prominent times. Let me bring you back in, gorgeous. It always happens when the guest is about to say something huge. It's absolutely hilarious. I'm so glad that it circled back around. Are you back? Yeah, cool. Is it always happens at the most, you know, the most significant time. I'm so glad that it circled back around to sadness and joy, because that's something that I wanted to ask you about. So please continue in what you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's just come into my awareness, and that I've been having some conversation with a couple of friends about recently, is this idea of the part of me that wants to be significant, and how I can potentially manipulate with anger to to be significant. I mean, even in a space like this, there's a part of me that likes that I'm being interviewed on Facebook, and I'm using the energy of anger to bring myself here, to use my voice, bring it forward, etc. And what I'm, yeah, like I have a decent sized ego. I know that, and sometimes I don't particularly like that. And it's an interesting conversation to have. It's a whole other conversation to have around the ego and the purpose of the ego, because I think it serves in many different ways. And but in relation to anger and to I notice that when I'm afraid, my anger can start to come in an unhealthy way to create a boundary, because I don't want to be seen in my fear, or I don't want to be, sometimes it's my sadness, that there's still in certain situations where I feel afraid to be seen as afraid, or I can feel afraid to be seen in my sadness or in vulnerability, like what seems like a vulnerability. There is vulnerability in anger as well. And we have learnt as well to use anger internally to set internal boundaries against our fear and our anger and even our joy, because of the fear of what other people may think about us, because we want to be loved, because we want to belong. And I see that is one of the key ways that I sort of manipulate a situation so that I can appear strong, when actually what's going on under the surface is that there's a lot of shaking, or that I just want to burst into tears, but I'm afraid of that. And I had a couple of those experiences over the weekend with some sisters that I spent some time with, and with my partner this morning. We had a big sharing this morning, and I held him in a practice of exploring some fear that was underneath, and some anger that was needed to shift spaces. And I want to, I can feel a vulnerability and some tears coming as I speak that, because I know it's still very present and poignant right now in my own journey around using anger, not to keep pushing forward so much, but to support the message to be the significant thing, to hold a really clear space so that the message is what becomes significant. What anger gets behind is the message that I'm here to deliver, the message that I'm here to be, as opposed to Stacia and the woman and the identity, rather than it lifting up who I am or what I think I am. That anger can actually hold a container so that I can feel more of my sadness, that keeps me in connection to myself, because that is the medicine of sadness. With the medicine of anger, it's more about clarity and direction and purpose and action and change, and going for what we want, and being passionate and excited, and activism, taking action on that which we're interested in. But sadness is needed. If sadness isn't present, the connection's lost, and you just have penetration without connection. And if fear isn't present, then I don't have, not this heightened fear, but if we just tone that down to a really soft, sort of subtle space, there's this very subtle vibration of fear that is necessary to keep me alert to my environment, to my inner environment, and also to my external environment. And so it guides me into which direction is the safe one to go. And the example I've used several times is that if you've got two dark alleyways to walk down to get to where you need to go, fear is going to be the one that gives you the signal that that's the safe one, and there's something not quite safe. That it's like, oh, how did I get there? And fear gives us the signals. Anger takes action. Sadness keeps us into connection.
Yeah.
And when these three core emotions or feelings rather, yeah, I'm doing it myself,
Mm.
are dancing together,
Yeah.
the capacity for joy comes online. Like joy is served by these others, and it's not, you know, there is a difference in a way, but there's an equality because they all
Yeah.
require each other to do
Mm.
their to bring their pure gifts into the world.
Yeah.
It's like a community, you know, you need all the different gifts that people
Yeah.
bring in community in order to have a
Yeah.
whole functioning community. And
Yeah.
it's the same with these feelings. And for me, anger, and the reason why we focus on reclaiming anger as a priority is that
Mm.
it is the gateway feeling that it flushes out the riverbed that's been stagnant for a long time. When the big, you know, surge of rain comes through, this is the anger,
Yeah.
and it's strength that helps you to hold a solid container. And I know for myself and many people I've worked with now, as soon as we start bringing more anger into our system in a really healthy way,
Mm.
fear starts to show up, the fear that we've been suppressing for a long time, and the sadness starts to show up, and the
Mm.
joy starts to show up more because there's a
Yeah.
safer space that we're holding for ourselves to be able to hold more of those other feelings, and to be able
Yes.
to hold more emotional release of the emotional side of fear, sadness,
Mm.
and joy that have been held back as well. So
Yeah.
coming back to anger to me is really important to continue to build that strong, solid container and to keep
Yeah.
taking action on that which we want for ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And um, gosh, there's so much I love what you just said. Um, I do want to ask you in that, what was that? I had a question in there, but it's actually escaped me. It will come back if it's supposed to. I want to ask you about the correlation that anger has with courage. We've spoken about sadness and anger and fear and the role that they play. How is courage then linked to anger?
For me, courage is sort of wanting to step towards something, or having some kind of heart calling that we don't quite know how it's going to look, but we choose to take the action to do it anyway.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I don't know exactly. I think Fleecy talked about that last week. Actually, I remember watching that. Brene Brown
yeah.
talked about courage and the meaning of the word courage, of heart, like the
Yeah.
connection to heart. And for me, this is about listening to the message of the heart and the passion, the passion driver, I guess, or the
Yeah.
purpose, the part that wants to courageously move forward into the unknown, to take the next step without knowing what to do. And without anger, no action is taken.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that seems like a, a strange concept when it's first heard often, that without anger, there is no action.
Yeah.
But anger is the feeling that we need in order to act on that which we want or that
Yeah.
which we don't want, you know, to set
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yes.
And to me, that's connected to courage, in that
Mm,
to take the courageous next step, I
yeah.
need to have a relationship with anger strong enough that I can hold the fear that's going to be there and stay in
Yes.
connection and joyously perhaps move
Yeah.
forward.
Mm, beautiful. Beautiful. Oh yeah, there. I thought you froze again. Um, what I've heard and continue to hear a lot of people talk about fear and using the fear and how that is still fear based and therefore negative moving forward, and anger is very much of the same it invokes the same feeling, I think, in a lot of people, where we perceive fear as bad, anger is bad. What is your idea of, and a lot of spiritual leaders and gurus and personal development, like in any kind of development industry, what have you got to say to, not necessarily to those people, but what are your thoughts around deeming anger and fear and sadness as not a healthy foundation to take action upon?
The first thing that comes when I hear that is, if you're going to cut off anger, fear, and sadness, as far as listening to them to take action, you're cutting off 3/4 of the information that's available to you to navigate your life with. And actually, more than that, because without access to the information that's available in anger, fear, and sadness, I can't see a path for joy there either.
Yeah, good point.
And it's, I often draw this, as I talked about earlier, this map of anger, fear, sadness, and joy on 4 points of a compass. And specifically talk about these, these 3 being seen as negative emotions is often what we hear them talked about. Or this story of choose love, not fear.
Yes.
But to me, choosing fear and anger and sadness is an act of love. It's self-love. And if I'm not willing to acknowledge that I'm a human being that feels, then that's not a self-loving thing to do in my experience. And yet this has been meshed up with emotion. And I absolutely agree, don't choose emotional anger or emotional sadness or emotional fear to navigate anything with. It's not what it's for. But this comes back to this distinction of feeling and emotion. And if we're throwing out emotion, we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're throwing out those, those so-called negative emotions, it's just the way that they show up and explode or implode in their emotional forms, which is what we're so much more used to experiencing, rather than being able to create this separation and take responsibility. And this is what it comes back to: radical self-responsibility for the fact that you are a human being and you have feelings. And that they're there for a really incredibly powerful reason, to be vitally alive and ecstatic even. And, I'm not always vitally alive and ecstatic. And the more that you look into this, the more I've looked into this, the more I've discovered how much I've been holding myself back and how much I've been operating from a pain point, because I've got a lot of emotional sadness or fear or anger in there. I'm working with fear more at the moment, but I have a much healthier relationship with anger these days, and sadness comes a lot more easily. Fear is the big one for me right now, but I wouldn't be working with the depths of the fear that I am, and recognizing how the emotional stuff isn't serving me, but how the feeling of it can be serving me. I couldn't hold that without the anger work that I've done. I wouldn't even know that existed. And I've numbed myself for years and years, and that's part of the culture of feelings that is a big part of, I'll say, the Western world, because I haven't spent much time out of that, but aside from travels, which I was a lot more numb to back then. But overeating, overstimulating ourselves, overdoing pretty much anything, avoiding eye contact, all sorts of things. There's so many ways that we numb ourselves to feeling. I think the main reason is because we just don't know what to do with them, and we don't know what they're for. And I had a woman in our training say, I've got this really big toolkit of how to cope with feelings. And now I'm starting to learn a different toolkit of how to use them. And it's
Yes.
sort of like a hammer, anger is like a hammer. You can use it to smash shit and destroy something just as much as you can make a different choice to direct that energy to hammering in the nails and with clarity and purpose and build a really solid structure and a foundation for a whole different way of being. And there are just so many more possibilities available when we choose to reconnect with feeling, rather than be driven by this big surge of emotional energy that's not for navigating.
It's such powerful work, and it's just I don't even know, like, what do I want to say? I think until you really begin to explore that and open yourself up to understanding it and what it looks like for ourselves and how it's been showing up for us, and releasing that, can we really begin to move forward in this empowered way? Because I do absolutely agree that we've been shutting off these really powerful emotions. And as you said before, it's like shutting off really important information and, intelligence that, and a guidance system that is readily, really available to us. I wanted to ask you about, your yes and no's, and you've touched on that. And, our ability to, because in the workshop, in the Reclaiming Your Anger workshop, we went through the process of feeling the fear and using that, letting that build within us, and us saying no and yes, and understanding our energy in that. I had a real sense of significance in our ability to do that as adults, but also as well for our kids. And I've got 2 girls. So for me, I thought that is such a powerful, I'll say tool, for them moving forward. What do I want to say about that? I want to ask you about the significance of that, and what is the question I have around there? Let's start off by me asking you about what is the significance about our yes and no's, and how have we been disempowering our yes and no's in the past, and once you learn to use them and embody them as an ignition. Oh, we've lost you. Let's see. Oh, yes, I can bring you back. Oops. Oh, maybe I can. Oh, I don't know. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to bring Stacia back. Oh, now I can't even do anything. And my phone is loading. Well, that is, I can't see what's going on behind here. So I will ask you guys, what is your relationship with anger? How have you been using it or understanding it? And what were some of the things that Stacia said today that really changed your relationship, or the way that you actually view anger? I'd be really curious to know that. And I am trying to bring you back, beautiful woman, but looks like I'm not able to. That is, let me just see what I'm feeling. to do. I'm trying to bring her back. Stacia, I can't actually bring you back right now. So I just want to say this is that Stacia has tours coming up and workshops coming up that she's rolling out, several, and I want to say around different ones around Australia, and it's online. I really encourage everybody to connect with this amazing woman, because the work here is really profound, but it is learned behavior. And I do think that you learning from Stacia, but from someone who really knows how to hold that space. You're coming back. It is something that I think that seeking professional guidance about is huge. You're back. Thank you. Sorry, my phone just froze and went a bit silly there. So I was just saying how this work, I do feel like, and I don't say this very often, but I do feel like your work is something that everyone needs to do, but also to invest in professional guidance around this, I think is really, really important. You've just frozen again. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, cool. Your picture's frozen, but you're there. So okay. I did ask you about your yes and no's, but I think the internet connection is starting to just play up a little bit. Yeah, so we can discuss that another time, because that was so amazing as well. But I do want to ask you, so your work, I know that you've got workshops coming up in Melbourne, but you're doing a few in other places, aren't you?
As yet, no. We have done Reclaiming Anger up in New South Wales in Byron Bay. We will be doing some in Sydney in the very near future, I'm hoping. Don't have the dates planned exactly for that yet, though. There's the first women's only weekend is coming up next weekend, actually, 29, 30, 31 of March. There's still spaces in that if people want to jump in. And then we have mixed weekends throughout Melbourne. The next one will be the 24th to the 26th of May, and there'll be another 3, I think, before the end of the year. We do private coachings. We also have our trainers, actually, the possibility management trainers are out from Germany at the moment, offering a 5-day training called Expand the Box training, which involves anger work, but it also works with the other 3 feelings as well. And Reclaiming Anger does happen in Germany with Gero's sister when he's over there, and she runs her own woodcraft trainings in just near Berlin. So it's great to have that bridge to Germany as well. And it's in family. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is such empowering, important work that you do, and I feel really grateful that I discovered you, and for myself, but so I can also share your work with my people as well, because it really is extraordinary, and something that I am really passionate about is just ditching conformity and and you know, just introducing people to a much more self-responsible you know, way that, and self-honoring way that we can empower ourselves without, you know, working on the, you know, patriarchal hierarchy, you know, all of this crap that we've been doing for so long. I think that we're so ready to ditch all that and be really real with feelings like anger and sadness and fear, and how we can use them, you know, to help us, you know, take action and, you know, find ourselves, you know, to open up that level of communication as well. So I just want to say a big thank you for you doing all your work. And guys, this work, I really believe that it is something that you need guidance on. Would you agree with that, Stacia?
It just froze as you were saying a few words and then you came back on again. Can you say the last sentence again?
Yes, so I really feel like your work is work that you need guidance on in unpacking and discovering, and to learn how to break down, and understand this, for ourselves. It's not something that I would necessarily go, hey, yep, I think it's something that people need to invest in. I really do.
At the beginning, absolutely. I mean, because we've learned such a different way to be, as I said, to cope with feelings and push them aside. So
Yes.
to start to learn the subtleties and the differences between healthy, responsible anger and unhealthy, sabotaging, gremlin-like anger. For example, we have an archetype that we work with called the gremlin, which is like the inner saboteur. And that's just the part that really, has helped us to create the stories and the beliefs and the boxes that keep us safe, which we need, maybe we needed them when we were kids, but we don't need them anymore. But it doesn't really like the idea of us reclaiming aspects of ourselves that are going to make us more powerful and stand out more in the world and maybe attract attention that might feel uncomfortable. So at the beginning, I feel absolutely it's really helpful not only to get guidance from people that are a bit further down the line, for example, but to just work in a group, because you can't see your own blind spots. And we all have blind spots. And to have a group of people that are, everyone's learning and they've got their own experiences, but to see someone showing up and come alive and see this glimmer of joy in their eye from reclaiming an energy that then has the capacity to revitalize and to help us to take action on the things that are really important to us. Like, it's at the core, this is, reclaiming anger is reclaiming love. I mean, reclaiming feelings is that, but there's something about the empowerment of anger that is reclaiming our capacity to take action on that which we love. And it might be going, for people or for causes. I mean, some of the things that have been going on in the world recently in New Zealand, or with the people that are rallying around the climate change stuff now, it's until we stop and actually take down the wall of which is the unhealthy aspect of anger that we can use to keep the wall up and keep us separate from what's happening in the world. If we can use the energy that we're expending to keep this wall up and bring it inside and help it to keep ourselves upright in feeling, or collapsing in feeling, what it is that we're feeling when we see what's going on out there, it's only then that we're going to take action from a really healthy, inspired, connected place, rather than action from emotional fear or emotional anger. Emotional energy, rather than connected, self-empowered, radically responsible, being for myself and my actions and how it impacts that around me, where we could be just creating a whole new reality and a whole different set of possibilities for what our lives can be. Our capacity to feel is our capacity to be magical, really. I mean, that might sound a bit woo-woo. That moves us is what we feel, and that there's information in there that is connected to so much of what's around us, including the people that we love. And it does, it does take a lot of courage to show up in all that we're feeling. I just said to two dear sisters yesterday morning, as I was shaking with some fear, that I'm afraid that they won't want me around if I really show the fear that's there. And they came closer and hugged me, but I still have an old story that's not okay. Even though I do this work, but I have the capacity to speak these things, and I have people around me that are willing to hear and give me feedback and show me my blind spots, and I can show them theirs.
Yeah.
And I think the willingness to feel, the willingness to feel, and the capacity that we have to create anything that we want and to take action on that which we believe in love is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Doing it together is, yeah, necessary to start with. And I said to start with, actually, you know, at the beginning, but doing it together is just, I think, what makes it worthwhile, life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you know, the ability to allow ourselves to be seen and heard, and really honoring that expression as to what's showing up for us real time, and radically accepting our truth in that moment, I think is the most powerful experience and self-honoring that we can really gift ourselves and others. You know, so many, I'm really beginning to realize that, you know, for so many years, it's, you know, ugly was ugly and don't go there, or anger was ugly and don't go there. But you know what? The more I really honor it, I actually find it sexy as fuck. You know, there's such beauty in it. That just, you know, it does bring absolute just an openness and just this huge amount of love, you know, whenever it shows up and however it shows up. So, which is a beautiful thing. Beautiful woman, I want to thank you for today. You are absolutely amazing, and the work that you're doing is incredible. Thank you for being so honest with us today and so open. And I can't wait to continue to see and encourage people to connect with you, and continue for you to just do this amazing work, because it is so important. And we haven't been seeing it. So it's so refreshing to see you do the work that you do. So I just want to say thank you for being you and having the courage to do this powerful work. So yeah, thank you for being here today. But more than that, thank you for showing up every day and doing the work.
Thanks, Renee. And I really thank you for seeing it and valuing it, and for what you're doing in supporting all sorts of amazing work to get out there, and for supporting this to have more of a voice, for inviting me in.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much. And everybody, I will be back at the same time next week with another amazing guest. But yeah, thank you so much for today. Thank you for everybody watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.